One. Hi everyone, my name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council for Australia and New Zealand, and also the Secretariat for our initiative, the Centre for Data Leadership. Welcome to another Digital Twin Sessions interview, our 30-minute chats with digital twin leaders. And today I've got with me on the line and on video is Serena Moreno from Accenture. Hi Serena, how are you?
Good, Adam. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So Serena, let's jump into this. I'd like to start, if I may, asking you to sort of give us a quick bio. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. I belong to Accenture's strategy and consulting team. And within that team, we have a part of that organization called Industry X.0. And Industry X.0 is really Industry 4.0. So, as you know, that's the digital and physical convergence. And I work for the manufacturing, operations, supply chain service group. So what we try to do is, we try to go out and help customers pivot their businesses to digital by using, leading edge technology like, 5G or edge, AR, VR, and so forth to be able to help them make that transition.
This is a really, I would imagine, interesting time for you guys, right? Because just your context setter there around sort of, transitioning and pivoting to digital. I mean, we're kind of going through probably the largest experiment globally of kind of pivoting to digital. And I'm referring just, basically to sort of work from home and video conferencing and things like that. Given the times that we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic, just quickly to kick off, any kind of interesting observations or comments to make around our current sort of work arrangements and how we're sort of all transitioning to digital at the moment?
Yeah, so we are extremely busy at the moment, and I think for two reasons. One is people are realizing that maybe some of their infrastructure or technology isn't at a point where they can cater for the larger workforces or working remotely. But the other side we're noticing as well is people are they've got a bit more time to be able to look at these projects, which they haven't had time to do before. So, we've got, we're at the moment extremely busy, which is fantastic.
Do you think this is going to bring a greater appreciation for digital and data more broadly?
I think it certainly will. I think, there's a lot of discussion around this and will the workforce actually change? Will people be operating, differently after we get over this pandemic? So, and I think people will. I think once we put that infrastructure in, I think it'll give people a lot more options as to how they work, where they work, and so forth. So I think that it definitely will change the way we work. But again, we as humans are social animals, and I think that I, for instance, can't wait to get back to face-to-face meetings and can't wait to get back to more of that social interaction. But I think it's certainly going to change the way we work and live after we pass this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk digital twins. I want to start by just going straight to the value proposition and the value. So through your lens, the lens through which you look at and work on and advise around digital twins, talk to me about the value proposition. So sell me the digital twin. Let's start there.
Sure. Give you a bit of background for me. So I've been working with digital twins now for about 15 years because my background is in this engineering, design, manufacturing, operations, and service. So we've been using digital twins now for about 15 years, constructing things like, aircraft engines, or constructing things like, motors and construction equipment and all sorts of things. So what we used to do is we used to develop this stuff in a CAD tool. Mm-hmm. And then we used to simulate it. So that was the digital twin, the simulation where we used to actually work out engineering flaws. We used to do digital prototyping. We used to refine the design before it went into manufacturing. So that's really my background of where the digital twin actually started for me about 15 years ago. So now we're starting to find so many new ways in which we can utilize this twin. So now we're automating things like entire factories where we create a whole digital twin of the whole factory. We figure out what the resources need to be, what the equipment needs to be, what the load needs to be, and we can simulate all of that in the twin. I also do a lot of work with smart cities as well. So there's a lot of government departments at federal, state, local levels that are looking at the twins. But really, you know, from my background, I think the same principles apply to what we were doing, how we were doing this before. So digital engineering, for example, is really close to my heart, because I think that people really do need to think about this data, and they do need to think about the frameworks and the structures to be able to support this, the same way you would do if you were building an engine, an aircraft, or a boat, or a building, or whatever. You need to make sure that you know, you understand what your play is in the marketplace, what your team is going to look like of people that you need to collaborate with, and then figure out, all right, you know, what value are they bringing to the table? How are you going to actually feed some of this thing back, and get all of that stuff in play with this market structure, and then actually look at, all right, how you're going to actually now build this.
So let me just break down time for a moment. So, you know, we know that kind of the digital twin idea has been around for a long time. And, you know, as you say, you've been mucking around in this space for a while, you know, NASA and GE and
Yep.
industry and vehicles and engines and all that kind of stuff. The game has changed, though, hasn't it? Question mark. In that the data, right? So the data that feeds the beast has changed in type, in level of detail or granularity, and of course frequency in real time. So if we start sort of, because we can plug things into the internet now, you know, the Internet of Things really presents an even sort of more interesting opportunity. Would you say, because of the changing data that we have available now, that potentially the value proposition is becoming stronger and stronger, or is it just it's a different value proposition? Can you talk to me about data and value proposition and how that's changed over time?
Sure. So I think it depends upon what you're trying to build. So, you know, for example, if you were an organization, you might want to build an internal twin, right? So there's proprietary data there, you've got connectivity to all of your different systems, and then you'd have a component of that you'd say, I now want to share this with the community. So you need a different approach, like you said, to the data. Whereas if you were a federal government and you were building a twin and people were all feeding that information into the twin, it was being consumed, it was being merged with other information, and you were then putting it into context that you need to then feed it back, then you've got different challenges with that data. You know, you've got IP challenges, you've got security challenges, you've got frameworks and structures that you need to be able to create to say, all right, how am I going to consume this? What structure does it need to be in? And also, it's not just structure, like you mentioned, as well as different formats. So, you know, when you're building a twin, you've got a lot of geodata, you've got CAD data, you might have physical drawings, you've got word specifications, you know, you've got weather data coming in, you've got road traffic data coming in and stuff when you're doing your planning for new cities and things. So really, you know, you need to consider all of those in that framework, because then you're starting to, you know, open up the door for things like big data, for different formats of data, how you're going to handle it. Because I think one of the things we've noticed dealing with a lot of our clients is that they consume a lot of data, but they don't know what to do with it. And that, you know, applies even more when you start to talk about smart cities. You're collecting a lot of sensor data, and what are you doing with it? How are you contextualizing it to be able to use that data to make some really smart decisions? Because I think the the biggest advantage with smart cities in any format, whether you're actually building a road or an entire city, is to get the information in context. So you can start to do things like predictive analytics, or you can start to put applied intelligence around it to make sure you can make better decisions with that information. Whether you use that for things like asset management, or whether you use vision systems to understand, there's a crack in this road, when do I need to fix that crack? And you can, take photographs over time and analyze that information and plan your maintenance a lot better. So yeah, data starts to become a lot more complicated.
Do you have a favorite function of the digital twin? The digital twin, it can model, it can test scenarios, it can kind of manage data, it can generate insights, it can visualize. Do you have a particular favorite function? Like it offers many things, right? What's your favorite?
I like the visualization because I'm a visual person. So I love to see all of this information coming together. And like you said, from different sources, and what can you do with this information? So, but the visualization is also, from a data perspective, becomes quite complex because, you've got this LOD 0 to 4 scale. And that scale gives you different views of the twin. And I think we do a lot of work with smart cities around the world, and people have got to like an LOD 3, but they haven't done the 4, which is more the internal, buildings and the walkthroughs and stuff like that. So I think, again, this is an area that we can see is evolving, and, it's, it'll get there, but I think, it's going to be a good 5 to 10 years as people build up these layers, because it's almost like you are layering this thing. So you need to work out in the short term, what do you want from this twin to be able to help you improve your operations? What's the minimum level of twin that you need to build? And then work out an infrastructure that can actually then scale. So you might say, all right, this is our North Star. This is where we want to be. This is where we're starting now. Let's architect for where we want to be, but we understand that it might take us a good, 5 or so years to be able to actually get there. So you're not going to get the full benefits of the visualization until you've actually finished it. But you certainly would have a lot of low-hanging fruits along the way that you can continue to justify and, fund these projects as you go along.
Okay, so the next conversation I want to have is how do we build a thriving marketplace? But let me start with a contextual point. So I think from memory, there's around 3,500 days until it's 2030. Okay, so we're in that new decade now, and many identify this decade as a really critical decade in the context of big global challenges. Now, just put the current global pandemic aside for a moment. Issues such as climate change, we have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, poverty and congestion, all these urban challenges that we have, and social and economic challenges in our cities. So we're on the clock, and time is short. 5 to 10 years, which you've mentioned a couple of times now, sounds about right, but that's too long. So share with me your ideas around how we accelerate that. How we shorten that. How do we build a digital twin marketplace, thriving marketplace, solid demand, good supply? How do we truncate that time? How do we get there sooner? How do we build that marketplace?
Yeah, so, it's all about collaboration. You're absolutely right. We need to be able to share ideas, and there's a lot of different pockets at the moment of knowledge. So I think that to be able to accelerate this, we need to learn from each other. We need to be able to share ideas. We need to be able to, invest individually in a outcome, right? And I know at the moment the government's providing quite a lot of funding and proof of concepts all over the place to say, what does this technology actually mean? Because I think, when you talk about smart cities, when you talk about digital twins, people are still learning. What can we do with this thing? What's it really? How are we going to join the dots? So I kind of look at it as a bit of it's almost like a puzzle where you're putting pieces together. So you've got the big picture. So let's say, got the complete puzzle, which goes out about 10 years, 5 to 10 years. And you're saying, all right, how do we start to build this thing? So the more people that you have building this puzzle and joining these pieces together, the faster you're going to get to, your outcome. So we do a bit of work around ecosystem. So we actually help a lot of our clients figure out, what does your ecosystem really look like here? What levels of people do you need for this twin? So you might need, it's a market, like you mentioned, a marketplace. So, this is the outcome as government that you want to be able to achieve. But really, to do that, what are the private sector players that you need in this? Who are the university people that actually understand this? Who are the independent bodies? Let's bring all of these people together to be able to share ideas. And, there's a lot of universities doing some really clever work at the moment as well with digital twin. And, they're actually marketing some of their services to industry. So I think the more we can actually bring these pieces together, the quicker we're going to get to our outcome.
From a demand side perspective, Serena, is your client list predominantly government or private sector? Who's kind of really advancing digital twin at the moment in terms of investing in them to sort of generate value and greater efficiency in things? Which part of the market?
So we deal with two sides of the market. So with my background, I do a lot with manufacturing and industrial. So we're doing a lot of twins in that side of the business, but I call that more the internal kind of digital twin environment. So they're doing that to be able to accelerate their time to market for products. They're building digital twins to be able to manage their assets more effectively. Because when you've got large scale assets that are worth millions of dollars per asset, the digital twin really helps them with actually managing those assets. So that's the industrial is one side of it, which is more that internal value proposition. And then we do a lot of work with governments around that external, value proposition of how can we make our governments operations a bit more effective? How can we collaborate with industry? So what we're also seeing is a lot of the engineering, procurement and construction companies that work for government looking at digital twins and actually trying to work out how do we actually now start to create the kind of twin that can collaborate across these 4 or 5 different layers.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's move to our kind of final area of discussion, which is sort of what's next. And I like to think of things in threes. It's a number that I can handle. What would be your kind of 3 next steps in helping us, really kind of catalyze that thriving digital twin marketplace that we're aspiring to? What are your tips?
Yeah. So I think the first step is collaboration, like you mentioned before. How do we collaborate as a larger community? And then how do we break that down into individual pockets or working groups? And how does that all actually join up in the end to form that, overall puzzle? I think the other thing we need to look at is frameworks. So when it comes to data and standards and communication, it's really important to build a solid structure. And that structure would be like a process framework, but to go with the process framework, you need a lot of standards around data and security, and how you're going to communicate information. What's the platform going to be? Is it going to be like a cloud platform? Are you going to have like open APIs to communicate, or are you going to be able to put out a standard where you say, if you're building something, here's some APIs that you can actually incorporate into your platform. So I think that's something that, is evolving, where I think we'll have a combination of open and closed platforms. So you'll have a lot of government groups that will have open platforms, which you'll be able to feed into. And then you'll have a lot of private organizations that are building more closed platforms, but having part of that actually open. So I think, that data and infrastructure and frameworks are going to be really important. The collaboration is going to be really important. And I think, thirdly, I'm just excited that we see a lot of activity in this space. So that's a very positive thing, because I think that, when we talk the 5 to 10 years, if we keep going at the rate that we see the industry accelerating, that's going to be a lot quicker. But it's got to be built on the right kind of framework to be able to share information so we can all get there a lot quicker, rather than individual pockets getting there.
And have you, just on that last point, have you seen an increase in sort of interest and awareness around digital twin broadly? I mean, some think that it's only been around for 12 months, yet I speak to folks like yourself and, it's actually been around for a long time, but has it become sort of more commonplace in recent times?
It definitely has. So we work across, a lot of different industries. So one of the industries, for example, in digital twin that I've been dealing with for about, let's say around 8 years or so, is the medical industry.
Yeah, okay.
So digital twins have actually accelerated in medicine dramatically. So surgeons are now practicing operations on a twin of a human heart, for example, before they actually do the actual operation. Or what they're doing is they're using a digital twin to actually operate, and then the robotics are actually operating on the person, which is, they're working in the virtual, and the robotics are working in the physical. So that area has improved dramatically, over the last 5 to 8 years. Whereas smart cities, I think that's more the newer area, where people are now saying, all right, how can we increase the scale of this? So we've been doing it for a long time in different pockets. Now, how do you bring this together? And I think that's going to be the challenge. I think, we help a lot of our clients build platforms that can accelerate and scale. But I think industry in general needs to understand the complexities of that, to be able to now have multiple twins in an overall digital twin, and just the whole collaboration around that.
There's this idea of national digital twins, right? In that sort of smart city space, it's certainly starting to sort of permeate. The UK government, the Centre for Digital Build Britain, they want to build a national twin. Likewise, New Zealand is sort of playing with that idea. Can a digital twin ever be too big?
I don't think so. I think, again, like you said, it depends what you want from it. And that's what we do a lot of work around. So if you want a national digital twin of the whole country, what's that going to mean to you? How are you actually going to use that? What sort of information do you need in that twin to help you at a national level make better decisions with the right information? But how's that going to, it's like a waterfall effect, right? How's your waterfall actually going to look like? And then how's the value going to be articulated in the different levels of the waterfall, basically?
Yeah.
So I think you just have a bigger challenge that you need to think about. But I think it's actually a really good idea. But I think information, data will be the issue, because there'll be a lot of privacy around that. How much do people actually want to share? So, when we talk to our clients, we say, well, really need to understand what value your ecosystem is feeding into this and what value you're feeding back. Because unless you think about that, people aren't going to do that, because it means more effort for them to be able to create this in more of that open environment. And if they feel that they're getting the value back from it, that'll maybe streamline some of their internal processes and things like that, they're going to do it. But if they don't see that, they might say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, but you'll never actually see it eventuate. So yeah, we do a lot of work around ecosystems and frameworks.
Yeah. It kind of really, at the end of the day, all paths lead back to data, doesn't it? More and more, I'm not a digital twin expert, but more and more as I speak to people and I research, it's really a data play from what I'm picking up.
Yeah, it definitely is a data play, because even though I said I like the visual side of the twin, to actually see it operating and seeing how people can get value from this. Because from my background, people had to run heaps of reports to try to figure out, well, what data are we actually looking for in these reports? Or I used to work in manufacturing environments where things used to go wrong and you'd lose a lot of money, millions of dollars by the minute, but you couldn't actually react to that thing because you actually needed to understand what actually went wrong. So the whole thing with the digital twin is you've got that information in real time. You've actually got those flags set for alerts and things like that. You can actually use that information to be able to even predict issues before they arise. But if you're not predicting it, you're able to react when they actually arise. So, a lot of the work we do with clients as well is to bring in that whole supply chain, or what we call a value chain, because you need to be able to really get the full benefits of a twin, regardless of the scale. You need to have all of these different data points, like you actually mentioned. So you need to understand, what information do we need? Do we need information from our ERP systems, from our supply chain systems, from our customer CRM systems, external parties, and so forth? And that all has to come together.
It becomes endless, doesn't it? Because what we can sense and gather data from these days is mind blowing. Well, it's exciting times, and that's why we think the digital twin is, I think, a superior platform for activating data and helping us make better decisions. Serena, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us on the Digital Twin Sessions. I'm glad we've got leaders like you that are helping us build the marketplace for digital twins, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Adam. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
No worries at all. Thanks.
Bye.